talking about Friday.
Yeah, we got after the Friday meeting about clip. We just one thing I want to raise is one reason I'm thinking so much federation and is I don't expect people to ultimately agree on names. So can we have can we know we're speaking about the same concept if different subcommunities are not using the same name? Can we work without requiring that people use the same name for the same concepts? For me, that's a use case. That said, I've been thinking hard about something you pointed out, Stephen, that we can use names as concept identifiers. I said, oh, I think it creates more churn. I still think it does, but I've decided it may not matter, and you may be right about this one, and it saves a layer. So I might be rejoining your camp on this finally.
Not 100% certain on understand what you mean by that.
Okay. We'll get back to it. I think let's get back to use cases. Or a separate.
Have you already talked, or do you want to talk for a second about bringing other people on the call and stuff?
We did talk about it. We said we probably need to have more than one. We probably need a shorter onboarding document than the CDL white paper. We may need more than one because we still don't have consensus on so many key issues. So burden on many of us to write stuff. It would be nice if we had a tool where we could do all of this. And by the way, Felix, where are you at with your tool work?
Didn't continue. Sorry.
Okay. I'd really like to spend time with you on this, see where you're at. I'm back in this coding saddle. My brain is working slightly more reliably these days, thanks to sleep pills.
So I was just thinking because like, you know, these calls are quite different from like the OGM calls. So
Right.
I think setting, which the intro document could do, but I mean, even just having them watch the same episode, because this isn't a brainstorming kind of what do we want to do.
No, it's a totally different structure.
Yeah.
I was thinking doing an onboarding video would be good because it's easier for us to prepare. Here's 10 minutes about what we think are the key issues, and let's each go through that 10 or 20 and make that an onboarding video. This is the kind of things we're discussing. But
yeah, I also wonder if it'd be quicker to right now just put the one where the Y source guys came in or something. I don't know.
That could work.
Yeah, because I just can't imagine. I didn't look at the full list, but I can't imagine Pikaminski Roy has time to dive in as deep as. I don't think
given his current set of interests, I think he should.
You think he might? Okay.
And as I said,
definitely be wrong.
I tried to explain what we're doing at some depth, and people said, yes, we want to know about this, or some people did, including Pete and Michael. And Michael would definitely be a great addition.
I mean, I would say that the first tip should be watch the last two meetings, and then if you're still interested, so we give them the link to maybe these say give them a link to the meetings. I haven't watched them.
I did give them the links to the YouTube channel so that they know what it's about.
I would tell them they need to watch them before they come. Anyways, I've taken enough time.
I mean, as a counterpoint to that, like those meetings are not that watchable until you're involved in the intricate details of,
That's the information I want them to know.
Yeah, but but it's not the information, because you want them to know what we're doing. Like I would like our principles, the principles in the white paper stated there, and these are working meetings. But I'd be happy when it's a bunch of people to schedule a separate meeting that's just a welcome aboard, and here's kind of our objectives, and here's.
Yeah, I just think before they even come to the welcome aboard, they need to know what to know what it is to know not just what we're trying to accomplish, because a lot of people are interested in that, but the level of dedication it takes.
I agree with the goal, but I think I agree with Tim that let them see the welcome aboard first, because otherwise we know that the work meetings are going to put them off. If they see an onboarding meeting, then a real meeting, and then they'll understand the dedication. But forcing them to see an onboarding, a work meeting before an onboarding meeting, that's just needless torture.
So for the onboard meeting, I think what would be interesting if we did that with Pete and maybe a couple other people from OGM and recorded that and had that as our onboard meeting, because then they could ask the questions.
That's a good idea. But we can also reference the other onboarding meetings with previous people, like with Jonathan, and we have all these. Yeah,
I might go back and see if I can find a few.
Yeah.
All right. So are we going to schedule a time to do that onboarding meeting then? Is that the next step in that? Do we want to take one of these meetings to do that?
You could do it Friday. I'm not there, but I'll run I'd like my viewpoint to be there also, so, since I'm the most divergent. Usually.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should join earlier rather than later, because right now they're very interested and active.
So who's the...
I would just leave it up to the people in contact with them to pick a time and date, and I would be okay, you know, if it took over one of my sessions, for example, I'd be okay with that. If it has to be on a day we don't normally do, which only means like Monday or Thursday, if it had to be on Thursday, I could do it on Thursday too. But you know, leave it up to you guys to figure out when is the time that works for them.
I think doing it on Thursday is perfectly sensible. I'll talk to them. We have an OGM meeting, a Free Jerry's Brains meeting on Mondays at that time slot. So maybe I should propose actually except I can't make this Monday, but or either this coming Thursday I could be there, or the following Monday would make sense as well.
Yeah, let's propose that, and then we'll record it and use it as our demo reel.
Yep, let's do that.
What is OGM?
Open Global Mind.
It's a loose group of affiliated people that want to save the world, mostly through visual thinking models, and then there's groups within that are working on climate and agriculture and stuff like that.
But
what does it stand for?
Open Global Mind.
Okay, thank you.
.org. I think what's important is they are the end users. They are our end users. They're people who do a lot of recording ideas and using those recordings to think. They're using tools for thinking.
Yeah.
And they're connectors. They're connect ID. They connect people. And so, yeah, they're our clientele.
Yep.
Target market, sorry, in English.
Clientele is the same in German.
What?
Clientele is the same in German.
Yes.
So understood.
We call them suckers in English. The sucker is one born every minute. No. Anyways, yeah,
they're always right. The suckers are always right. That's the
right. Customers are
American dichotomy.
Oh, and I mean United Statesian, not American. I'm sorry. That's anyway. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
The clientele exists in English, but it's more the Roman sense, which is something else again. Okay. Let's get back to our regularly scheduled meeting.
Well, we ended up Friday. I actually left before you finished your last things, but we had an overview of CLIP, and the goal was to see what already exists in academia in terms of modeling of concepts, propositions, as something we could maybe apply to what I've been calling kind of the canonical representation of a claim, whose main purpose, in my view, would be as a structured primary key for claims. I know there's a lot of other uses for this sort of thing, including how to relate them, and there's a lot of other things that go together. But essentially, one of the things is you could say that a claim is canonical. This is the canonical representation if you were able to model that proposition and apply definitions to all the things that require definitions, and say, okay, you're done. I'll repeat here that I don't imagine or intend that to be unambiguous. It's just that level of ambiguity with those definitions are there represented at any time you're going to bring together those definitions in that structure. Boom, that's that claim, and you can detect that way. So is there anything left you wanted to show in CLIP?
Not in CLIP. There's plenty of other models. That was the first one I showed, but I think this was an introduction to CLIP, which I thought was relevant.
It was very, very helpful. Yeah, and so there's a couple ways we can go. We can either look at other alternative models. I almost feel like another approach we could take is we could try to apply the model to claims and see how we feel about that. That would take a lot of work and study. I don't know if we've studied it enough, but maybe we could try a few simple exercises.
Yep. But I think going deeper, if we want to do that, I'd say that we need to go deeper.
Yeah.
In the study.
I need to take time out to study that to be ready to go deeper, I think. And I haven't had the time to do that. Yeah. But I do want to. The other, another thing we could do is take a totally separate angle now, which would certainly last the hour and more, which is, okay, that's the structure for the concept. That's how you would model. But how do you model the definition? Which is really also a discussion. It opens up the floor to how do we model disambiguation, right? Or how do we handle
that's yeah, I've been thinking about that recently, so I would have things to say. I wasn't feeling ready to. I don't think they're ready for prime time, so I would have waited. If we have something else to discuss, that's fine too.
I was just going to add disambiguation or disagreement.
Which is another use case. Yes.
It may not just be two people who are sort of like, oh, we really want this, pretty much on the same thing. Just, oh, you called that, I called this. Potatoes were good. It could be like, no, I think you're a bad person, and I don't like your viewpoint, and here's how I would frame it. And oh, you frame it that way, I can't talk with you. It could be.
No, absolutely. Okay.
And so, like that kind of disagreement. There's two reasons against going down that road. One is it implies conversation, which is something I don't necessarily accept as being a CDL thing.
In scope.
Not layer, whatever. We talk different layers, right? But certainly not in the modeling level of this. It's also something we've called process, which is something we have generally tabled for a later point, which is the general question of curation. What do we think would be the right process, and needing a model to fit that process as well. Because even if there's agreement, yeah.
So I would like to hear a little bit more about that, because this, I think, touches a little bit on something that Steve and I had looked at independently. Because I was showing him, how'd you my prototype, and he's like, oh, this is like a little bit more, like conversational, like turn taking, which I guess confused me, because I tend to think of debate as turn taking. So I guess maybe, I don't know, have you guys already talked to this at great length? This is gonna be boring, or like, why are you cutting out sort of responses or counter arguments? If I'm reading correctly into what you're saying, Tim, because that to me seems really important for changing people's minds and capturing, what are the things that people tend to say in response to blank.
But by the way, just before Tim gets into it, because it's a good question, I think there's good answers, but it's out of scope for Tim, and today's Tim's day. It's totally in scope for me.
Right.
So we're having these.
Well, why is it out of scope for you? I guess maybe that's the one thing I'd like to understand. How is that? How can that be out of scope if you're trying to have a canonical debate or model debate?
It depends on what you're seeing as debate, right? And your word of debate, right? I see debate as an activity used colloquially to mean you're trying to win a discussion, right? When you have formal debates, it's very often about who wins as opposed to a more dialectic approach of let's reason through this together collaboratively. Okay, that back and forth is also a dialectic, is also a process, is also a back and forth. So that's a conversation. The thing is that in my design goals for the canonical debate, I want to remove the claim and the argument from the one that makes it. And so
the person that makes it, okay.
The person that makes it.
But you could still have a back and forth with removing the person, just be like, this is what people tend to say in response, or these are the several responses that people tend to give.
Right, no, but again, it's the responses that people tend to give is connecting it to some sort of social activity, as opposed to
some sort of what activity?
A social activity.
Social,
right?
Okay.
Like the Society Library is a partner group, and they are focused more on from a perspective of American politics, and it would be that like their perspective is, well, we've gone through all the materials online and in academia and so on and so forth, and these are the political positions that we generally see repeated there. And that's an analysis of society's discussion, which is useful. And I'm not saying it's not useful, but it's a kind of information. It's not the kind of information I'm trying to elicit, which is more about the reasoning towards coming to a decision on something, which is, it's not what people say as opposed to what are the best arguments for and against this thing, which are independent of are people making good arguments, because people don't necessarily make good arguments. So it's trying to distill the best reasoning on each side.
But if your purpose is to sort of get away from, I don't know, the form of debate, like, oh, this person made a very convincing point. You're like, oh, no, don't be, don't worry about the convincingness of how it sounded, or like, oh, it sounded plausible, that metaphor. Look at the actual content. I mean, you can't control what people, motivated users, assuming that CDL becomes like a platform that, people generically become aware of and want to use. You can't control their mindset, can't control how they're going to approach the system and how they're going to try to enter information. You can try and guide them, but humans are humans, and there'll be one of two choices. Either you have a way of handling them even when they try to make specious arguments, or you have to sort of unilaterally exclude them and say, we don't think that the way you're approaching this is in good faith. You're entering in things that are not useful, or we see this is what you're really trying to say, so we're going to convert it for you. And the person says, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. You've changed what I said. And then it's just going to exclude some people, and it's going to limit the scope of CDL. At least that's how I see it. And I can tell that, or at least I think I can tell, that this is going down a path maybe you didn't want to go, but I just want to understand why we're excluding this direction. To me, it seems like it would be a problem, once the platform sort of reached a sort of critical mass, or that wanted to reach critical mass.
Right. Well, I know there's your idea of space, and there's the idea of like what happened to my contribution, which okay, that's a user issue. I don't see it as an issue, but at any rate, I don't weigh that as a very heavy part of the objective here. But there's the there is the crowdsourcing back and forth of adding reasons, right? And there's, okay, so to answer your question about how do you deal with the people, how do you let people in and state things their way, and then deal with the way they've entered that information, right? There would have to be anti-spam protection. That's a spam thing.
You can't just call this spam. You know, like a person.
No, I'm not calling it spam.
Well, but that's, I mean, that's sort of irrelevant to this conversation. Spam is way over here.
Right.
And like people who can't even agree on basic things, you know, like whether you call abortion, you know, murder, or, you know, family management or family planning, that's over here. That's not spam. Like these people aren't spamming when they call it murder.
I didn't say what
when
spam.
they call it.
Wait, let me finish. I didn't call it spam. I was starting as the base point of there is spam. That's a thing that needs to be dealt with. And then there's people coming in and stating things their way, and not everybody has the same way of saying things, and not everybody makes the same quality of argument and that sort of thing. And the goal is to let everybody participate. But my view of things is everybody should be able to participate, but everybody should be willing to massage, and this is some people disagree with me here, but massage these arguments into the best way to state them, right? And what is that best way? I believe in heuristics that can be followed for that, just like Wikipedia uses heuristics on what makes a good article. And you know, so there's incendiary language, things like that that can create a sense of bias that appeal to emotion as opposed to the substance of the argument. Then there's, you know, just is an argument spurious or not, and that sort of thing. So there should be a way to improve the language. There should be a way to recognize when two arguments stated totally different ways of the same argument and deduplicate, right? So these are all things that are needed, and in that way, you know, trying to protect the conversation, I see as contrary to this objective, because if you want to preserve the way people say things and help let them argue about it, I would say that's the sort of thing that already happens online. They're free to do that and go ahead and have that threaded conversation and Reddit or whatever. That conversation happens. I'm trying to create an environment and a tool that breaks through those things and focuses on the substance behind each argument, as opposed to the personal conversation or the way it evolves and that sort of thing. Now, there's still disagreement, which is the ambiguity, right? The use of words, and what does that word mean to you, and what does that word mean to me? And my answer to that is, it's not about what it means to you and what it means to me. It's about doing the best possible to place stakes in the ground and say, this is this claim, and these are the definitions behind it. Now, if you think it means something else, create a copy of that and put a new definition on that word, or use a different word or whatever. It's not that one person is right when there's a disagreement about definition. It's about have both claims and debate separately each one of the definitions, because you may find that, oh, if you interpret the word as this, you get this answer. And if you interpret the word as that, you know, the Black Lives Matter is a perfect example of that, right? What do you mean by Black Lives Matter? Well, you know, if I'm going to talk about, when you say all lives matter, right? Okay, I think that most people would agree with the statement all lives matter. The disagreement is about the statement itself. It's about the implication that by saying all lives matter, you're trying to deny that Black people have a special situation right now. Anyway, the point being that if you can lay down different definitions, then you stop debating about what did you mean by that word, and you go ahead and debate the substance, right?
So any system you would want would be able to have Black Lives Matter, and then it would have these alternatives that people could go into those alternatives. Like, oh no, I actually want to argue about, you know, Black Lives Matter over other lives, which I don't know who would want to debate there, but some people, I would say falsely interpret Black Lives Matter means that, or they would say, okay, we want to, debate this thing, which is, Black lives also matter. Is that
Right.
You're saying like both those things would be encompassed by CDL?
Right.
Okay.
And broken apart into more explicit statements, right? So that you can separate them, debate them separately. Microphone, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I really, okay, let's be clear. Tim's and my scope are not the same, but I really want to support what Tim is proposing here in the sense that what he's saying is let's have a space. For me, it would be a view of the whole system. I mean, he sees it as the system. I see it as a view of the system. That doesn't matter. But there's a valuable view, which is kind of a neutral point of view. And neutral point of view, we all know, is work. It's something you tend towards. It's an asymptote. It's never achieved, but it's still something that is a definite goal, is saying, okay, between, for example, pro-life and anti-choice, right? Is there a way to describe the position that is not as inflammatory as pro-life and anti-choice, which is about, against access to legal abortion, which is more neutral? And then we can talk about the various variants of that, if there is any exception clause or not, and blah blah blah. Being able to say, I believe strongly that such a system can only be fed by conversation tools. This is something where Tim and I disagree, but I mean, he's right too. I mean, it's at times people will go directly on the neutral point of view and add arguments in that view. And that way he's right. On the other hand, I'm thinking, well, this is just about everything's a conversation, everything's including that. It's just, this view is where we agree to play by the rules of going towards more neutral point of view. And if you don't, then you can be dinged for that and saying, okay, do your thing in a more back and forth thing. And then there will be a translation process to express whatever you said in your non-neutral tool into what we want to put in where your view is represented, but represented in a more neutral language. But saying there is a need for a way to show a neutral projection or a neutral of the heated debate, I think that's a perfectly valid and important use case. Now, the question is, what's the interaction between this database of neutralized statements and the database of here's all the heated statements from actual conversations in context? And that's part of the data model we're trying to build, because they both need to exist. I think we all agree they both need to exist, and they probably need to interact. But we do need a way to express the fact that a given concept has many representations, some of which are more neutral than others. One of my goals, because I think more federation, is let's have many tools, and within each community, you'll have here is this community's preferred form of the statement. And let's somehow say that this preferred form in this community is connected to that totally different preferred form in that other community. And by the way, here's the CDL, which has tried to choose a more neutral point of view canonical statement for the same idea. And that's one of them, and it's kind of central because it's gone through that extra effort of finding a hopefully less controversial expression. And it's important as such. But for me, I would also have here's this community's way of describing it, because communities matter and they have their own knowledge graph. And for me, it's a federation of knowledge graphs, and the CDL is one member of the federation, although a distinguished member because of its effort toward point of view. So that's how I see it. So I hope it makes it clearer that when you say, just Carl, when you say, why have we decided to, it's like, no, first there is multiple positions in here. I do want to make that clear. And we all know that real conversations are important, but Tim has carved out a space which is a place where the processes, as important as they are into feeding this neutral view, are abstracted out and made invisible in this neutral view. And I think that is a perfectly valid goal. But that doesn't mean the other goals aren't there or are excluded, but they may be excluded from this view. And creating a view where those can be erased is an agreed upon goal, but it's not the only goal. I want it to be erased in a way that it keeps contact with its origin, its provenance in conversations. That's one of my goals.
Yeah, we've talked about there's a provenance that could be, it was just created in the canonical debate, right? In which case it doesn't have a conversation of provenance. It is just you modeled it, mapped it there, and it will evolve. But you know, it is meant to be part of a larger ecosystem. Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting question there about, well, there's lots of interesting questions, but yeah, I think that I don't know if that answered your question, if that explains better what we're trying to do.
Sort of, yeah. I guess sometimes it comes down to the details, like with Marc Antoine, I'm curious how much of there's this neutral concept in CDL, and then there's these connections to federated communities. I'm just curious what these lines in between, are they just very boring single lines? Are there other entities there that sort of connect conversation? Yeah, it's in the details.
No, absolutely, and those are the details we're negotiating in these calls and are absolutely worth talking about. Yes, should I get into it, or is that what you wanted to talk about, Tim? Because I think it is what you introduced at the beginning of your part of the call.
The connection from the conversation to the
I would say the conversation between versions of different statement versions of a concept, including more or less neutral ones.
Well, I was thinking about discussing specifically the structure of definitions. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole separate question, which is process, which is mapping something in a contextual location to the neutral form and that sort of thing. But yeah, those are more process oriented. And I'm just more interested in that, like how do we think definitions would be structured in this case? Right. My original, like the white paper concept, was very simplistic, and it was essentially mapping entities to knowledge graph, right? So essentially to external definitions, and then having a relationship between definitions that you could navigate. But we see that we probably need more than that.
Yeah. What I proposed at some point is both basically a kind of interpretation link. Like somebody says this either name of an entity or claim or some statement that describes some idea. Again, whether entity, claim, argument, doesn't matter. You say this can be interpreted as this, can plausibly be interpreted as this other statement. And usually you'll make that claim in context. You're saying, the way this word is used in this particular context is, it means this in this context. But when you say it means this in this context, if you abstract out the context, what you're saying is this is a possible, in general, interpretation of that. And so you have these links of this can be interpreted as that. When the link is symmetric, you have a kind of equivalence relation. And you can say, okay, what is this thing that is concept that is common to all those concepts that can all be interpreted as one another. If the link is asymmetric, you have something that is more precise. And there's a problem, not the problem, but the situation, real situation, where an ambiguous statement can have two interpretations which are not inter-interpretations, and then you're saying, okay, this is an ambiguous form of these two non-equivalent things. Now, of course, there's a difference between ambiguity and partition, right? Mammals divides into herbivores and carnivores, for example. Though this is a partition, it's not an ambiguity. But Paris, is it Paris Hilton or Paris France? That's an ambiguity because there's no reasonable case where you'd want to refer to two at the same time. So that way it's more an ambiguity than a generalization, an abstraction. And but the question is, would you, does it make sense to interpret this as that ever allows you to define a kind of lattice of more and more precise meanings, and the concepts are in a way the bottom of that lattice are unambiguous concepts. And then you can think about, among the equivalence class, what's the most neutral member of the equivalence class of all the statements that refer to this concept. And the other key concept for me is distinction. If I have two concepts, each with their preferred representative statement, how do I differentiate them? And it's especially interesting if they're ambiguous interpretations of a common name. You would say, what is a claim that is true about one? Like suppose they're entities. What is a claim that is true about this one and not about that one? And if they're claims, there's usually one of the entities that is part of the claim about which you can make that. What's the distinguishing claim between those sub-entities?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Again, you come at it from the totally opposite direction that I want to take it, which is, you come at it from a statement that already exists, and how can we interpret it, and how would we break that down into different, which is one valid approach. But in the neutral canonical debate, where somebody could just come and, it's when you're just creating a claim, not when you're taking a claim that's out there, but when you're creating from scratch a new claim.
Yep.
And you want to do the work of defining the thing exactly. If you want to say, let's take it much easier. Paris was founded in whatever year, I don't know how long ago, 1024 or something. Then you're going to want to indicate what you meant by Paris right there.
Yep. Yep.
And there's lots of ways to define Paris, the city itself in France, as we talked about.
Okay. I had something to say about that. So maybe let me just finish my reasoning, because I was getting there. It's true. I always start from the constructivist approach. You're absolutely right. But one, and I'm sorry, but I think from conversations also. So let me go through a conversation process, and I'll get to your case. I'm saying Paris, and you want to know, what do you mean by Paris here? Because I'm not sure. It's ambiguous. I know it can be ambiguous. So what do you mean by Paris? And what information do we need to exchange to know we're talking about the same Paris? Is it all the claims made about Paris? That's a bit much. I think there is a notion that certain claims are distinguishing claims, and they're part of the entity, quote unquote, signature. It's not anything that's true about that, because, I said earlier, it could be empirically false versus, if this is not true about it, we're not talking about the same thing. And here again, the notion of definitional claim, distinguishing claim becomes important. I think when we're talking about knowing,
you may, I don't know if you want to explain this, or I could maybe try to explain to Carl this concept. Did that make sense, what he just said to you, Carl? Because it's something we've talked about before, and I don't know if it was clear.
Which part?
The notion of definitional claim.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's ways, you know, one concept that we've had is you could have a definition that is, I mean, it's hard to say, you know, when you're talking about the city Paris, you could make claims about the city Paris that help differentiate whether or not you're talking about, for example, the inner city or the larger metropolitan area. You can make claims about the size, you know, the total area of the city Paris. And you say, I'm talking about the Paris that is however many thousand square kilometers or whatever, right? Or, you know, and so there's lots of claims you can make about a definition that kind of solidify that's the thing I'm talking about.
It's the difference between population of Paris is however many millions, which is empirical and can change, and it's still Paris. Or you know, I can say Paris is where the Eiffel Tower is, and well, if the Eiffel Tower gets torn down for whatever reason, it's still Paris. And there's a moment where I'm saying Paris is a city. Well, if you're not talking about a city, we're not talking about the same Paris. It's part of the definition of what Paris is, that Paris. If I say Paris, if I say it's this exact geometric area, and then there's, you know, some legal change about the area, then maybe not sure. But I'm saying, well, Paris has to bloody include Ile Saint-Louis, and if Ile Saint-Louis is not part of it, then it's another city. You know, that's a good example of is Ile Saint-Louis then definitional? Well, it's certainly part of the existential nature of Paris to have Ile Saint-Louis in it. But that's a degree thing, yeah.
Just as a quick response, I mean, I guess because we haven't sort of just, you know, said what we're modeling things as, I mean, these definitional claims to me, from my perspective, I'm thinking in runs of text. So, I mean, these, to me, it's like, yeah, of course there could be, you know, these quote unquote definitional claims, and maybe some system would then have some way of attaching Paris in this word to Paris in another sentence. And so then it recognizes these are all definitional because they all relate to the same relate to the same entity, and they're all using, you know, like the is predicate or whatever to give, you know, I don't know, some RDF triple sort of thing. But if we're talking, so that, to me, I'm thinking runs of text, like, of course you could have that. Or, you know, but if we're talking about something more formal, like we have, you know, an OWL like system, or, you know, some common logic sort of system, like, yeah, I can also understand there's definitional claims. But I guess what are we?
Where am I going with that?
Yeah.
Which, yes, absolutely. Where am I going with that? What I'm saying is, once we have the notion of definitional claims, it can become a basis in conversations first to say, which Paris do you mean? Oh, I mean the city, period. And then we can ask Paris, Texas, or Paris, France, which is the next question. But I've already eliminated Paris Hilton and Paris, the Greek hero. They're out because I've said Paris, the city. So that's informal. Now, to go back to Tim's problem of, you know, Paris has this and that characteristic, which Paris do you mean? And his original intuition, and I think it's still a perfectly valid one, is let's have for example, Wikipedia URL or DBpedia URI or Wikidata and all of the above, right? I mean, these are all identifiers that help disambiguate which Paris do we mean, and that's perfectly valid. But what I'm saying is it's also valid to use distinguishing claims. If I have a name which has many interpretations which are totally disjoint, there's no useful common abstraction to them, then let's say, is there a distinguishing claim? And can that distinguishing claim be used as an annotation to say which Paris do I mean when I write the sentence in canonical debate? It's this Paris, which is a city, which is in France, which is blah, 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 blah. And France, of course, is another concept which has to have its own, it's a country, it's this location, blah, 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 blah. So, and there will be circularity there sometimes, which is problematic, but France, but yeah.
And since like the simplest representation of claims, as we've talked about, it could be a declarative sentence. essentially, what is a definition if not a stream of declarative sentences, right?
And or formal sentences, both.
Right, right.
But I absolutely agree. Declarative sentences are valid claims. If we can have formal versions, all the better for computer. But for humans, declarative is enough.
Another reason for definitional claims, which is why I originally thought about them as such, is because people can disagree about definitions. They can really think like, no, that's not a valid definition. And then you can have the whole discussion whether or not a definition is valid in that definitional claim, which is a separate use case, but it also supports that. So it's a benefit.
Approved. Yeah.
The one question though is, should, especially if we're talking about immutable claim, should the definition be changeable, or do you, if you want to have a new definition, you create a new claim with the new definition, right? So no, I want to remove this this definitional claim and add this one, right?
See, I don't think of one definition. I think of multiple definitional claims, and then the question, yes, it's mutable in the sense that we may agree, we may have debate about the relevance. Is that really definitional or is that empirical? And there that becomes an issue. But I expect multiple distinguishing definitional claims. And the distinguishing here is important. Is that helping me separate multiple meanings of the word Paris? Yes. Okay, so it's really an important definitional claim.
But I think Timothy's question is more in terms of the canonicality of claims again, right? I mean, if you have a definition of Paris and you have claims about Paris, what you really want to do is indeed, if you ever improve the definition of Paris in a way that impacts all the claims using Paris, so to speak,
okay,
that those get updated.
Valid question. If you see, well, the claims themselves are concepts, and as such, equivalence class and what's the most representative expression of the equivalence class. The same reasoning applies. You can have multiple definitions existing at a given point, which are all valid, and then you pick one, and that can change as the representative of the class. This is the most expressive, best, most neutral definition among all the definitions we have. And especially if the definition is composite, it's this claim and that claim and that claim and that claim, the claims are deduplicated. That means the equivalence class, blah, blah. So the definition would be in a set of equivalence class of claims for every equivalence class, preferred representative expression. And among those expressions, I expect to see formal. So maybe there would be the best linguistic expression and the best formal expression. And that allows us to help the deduplication process. But they would all be collectively the definition of the word, because there's multiple definitional claims that can be made about Paris. And for me, the definition is all of the above, so to speak. So it's not about change. It's about, I could add a new definitional claim. It doesn't change. Now, the question is adding that seen as valid? Is that really definitional? Is that changing some of the claims made about this entity Paris? And that's a valid question to ask every time you alter the definition. Or maybe it's exposed that a claim that was made about this concept, and let's think of more abstract concepts of Paris. Oh yeah, well, it was right when I thought it meant that, but with this new definition element, I realize that there's actually a distinction that can be made. And here the churn is useful. It's because I'm introduced a new definitional element that I realize that one of my non-definitional claims about the concept needs revision because actually there's a distinction that was missing.
And for that reason, for me, they're immutable. And yes, that imposes a curation nightmare that if you have relevant new definitions that pop up, like you need to revisit everywhere similar terms are used. Like, do you want to create a new claim that will improve the conversation about that claim in your canonical database, right? But for me, yeah, they're necessarily immutable because changing definitions might change the discussion. It is a problem.
I just want to say I have to run for work, but thanks everyone for this conversation. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Okay, that is a real question, Stephen, an important one. When you say they're immutable, are you like, of course, the component claims are statements, so they're immutable. That's trivial. That's probably not what you mean. When I say a concept is defined by a set of definitions, do you say that that set is immutable? And if I add to the definitions, I'm creating a new concept. Is that what you mean?
I don't think I'm making any reference to concept here. It's more like on a claim level. If you have a definitional claim and you have a claim that uses a definitional claim, I'm saying that the claim using the definitional claim should always use that definitional claim. You can start changing the definitional claim because it will impact anywhere that any claim that uses it.
Okay, and I think I both agree and disagree with you. I agree fundamentally in the sense that when you made that claim, those were the definitional claims active, and that if the set of definitional claim changes, the claim may become invalid. So you want the claim to remember which definitional claims were. So that way, yes, I agree, it's immutable. On the other hand, if a new definitional claim is added to Paris, and I said the concept, but yeah, the concept or statement.
Is the concept here the run of text Paris, or
the equivalence class that is distinguished by a set of claims? Like I'm saying, here's Paris, which can correspond to many concepts. Here I'm saying, okay, I'm interested in the Paris to which this claim applies. Okay, and that is supposed to be narrow enough with the appropriate distinguishing claims that I know which Paris I'm talking about, right? And then I'm saying, you know what, I'd like to add this definitional claim to this thing, which is defined by these sets of claims. And that's what I'm calling a concept in a way. And it's also...
So I don't have a notion of that concept. I do think it's a relevant notion if you're striving for canonical claims. But in light of our terminology discussions, I wouldn't call those bare claims because they don't have a shared immutable representation. Immutable, like if the concept, because the concept is not immutable.
A concept is not immutable. I agree.
Exactly,
totally.
and in that sense, it's not a bare claim. What might be is that canonical claims aren't bare claims, and I think that's something worthwhile talking about because there's some benefit about having mutable claims if you're striving for something like Timothy wants to do with CDL.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting. And I see what you're saying, and I agree even. I'm saying there is the need for the bare claim, as you propose to call it, and I agree, to be based on the immutable set of the definition at the point. But we need to have a mechanism to say, you know what, let's add this claim and let's make it really convenient to evolve all the bare claims about Paris to become these bare claims about this improved Paris with this new definitional claim. Yep. And yes, that's what's the interaction between the immutable bare claims and the concept evolution process. Yep. And yes, that's a conversation. And what I mean by concept is indeed something that evolves in time and is the thread of how this bare concept snapshot, bare concept or static concept evolves in time as its set of definitional claims evolves. Okay, good. But we're in agreement. It is a good stopping point unless somebody else has something to add.
No, it's food for thought. We could try to get down into design, how you would design something like that, but not today for sure.
That's sure.
So yeah, it looks like a good stopping time.
Excellent.
On the minute. Wow, that's a first.
First time.
See you tomorrow. Yes.
Tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Excellent. Bye.